They say time heals all wounds, but standing alone in my apartment at 6 in the morning, I knew time had only taught me how to hide the ache. The city was still asleep, quiet, but for the distant rumble of a delivery truck, and I felt the weight of silence pressing into my chest, heavy like a stone I couldn't dislodge. I laced up my sneakers with hands that trembled more than I cared to admit. Each loop a reminder of mornings James used to tie them for me, his fingers brushing mine with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. I stepped outside into the crisp dawn air, the chill biting at my cheeks, the sidewalks slick with last night's rain. The world smelled of wet concrete and old leaves, and for a moment I wondered if anyone else could feel the ghosts drifting through these empty streets. My feet carried me to Central Park, almost by memory alone. The gates yawning open like an old friend, welcoming me back to where I always came to forget. With every stride, I sank deeper into my thoughts, memories of laughter and lazy Sunday mornings playing like a movie on loop, until I almost convinced myself he might be waiting at home with coffee and that soft smile. My breath puffed in sharp clouds as I dodged early joggers and cyclists, the rhythm of my steps the only thing keeping me tethered to the present. Then, a sudden blur of motion to my left, a flash of dark green, and before I could process it, I crashed into something solid. The impact rattled my bones, knocked the air from my lungs, and sent me sprawling across the damp gravel path. My hands scraped the ground, pain flaring, but it was the warmth beneath me that froze me in place. I looked up, eyes locking onto his. Dark hair, stubble framing a strong jaw, eyes wide with surprise, and something else, something I hadn't seen directed at me in a long time. His arms were around me, steady and sure, as if the world had stopped to cradle us both. My heart thundered so loud I could barely hear the city anymore. I couldn't move, didn't want to move, the rush of heat pulsing through me more shocking than the fall. His scent filled my head, clean, warm, a hint of cedar that made my thoughts stutter time. That cruel and relentless force seemed to pause just for a breath, just for us. I found my voice, raw and small. I'm so sorry. The words tumbled out with a shaky laugh as I pulled back, my palms burning from where they'd pressed against his chest. His own laugh, low and rich, rolled over me like a wave, and I wanted to drown in the sound. No, it's my fault, he said, his hands lingering just long enough to make me wish they'd stay. I stood, legs unsteady, eyes flicking to his as a flush crept across my face. The morning light broke through the canopy, spilling gold over him, and I felt something dangerous bloom in my chest, a hope I thought I'd buried with James. And for the first time in years, I realized how desperately I wanted someone to see me. They say grief fades, but it doesn't. It simply burrows deeper, until one morning you wake up and realize it's woven itself into the fabric of who you are. The sun had yet to rise over Manhattan, the city shivering beneath a pale blue sky. When I stepped out of my building, I could still smell last night's rain clinging to the cracked sidewalks. Each breath of the chilled air scraped against my lungs, sharp and raw, reminding me I was alive, even if I didn't always want to be. I adjusted my headphones, but didn't press play. Music felt like too much company. The quiet of the dawn suited me better. The hollow echo of my footsteps on empty streets, a perfect reflection of the emptiness I carried. Central Park waited for me like a cathedral of old trees and forgotten dreams. I passed the wrought iron gates with a nod to the statue of the angel at Bethesda Fountain, mist curling around its wings, as if the park itself was exhaling. My legs moved out of habit, each stride a ritual I'd kept since before James died. Back then, we used to run together, breathless with laughter, our hands brushing in stolen moments. Now I ran alone, chasing the shadows of memories. I drifted past the first bend, where the path split near the stone bridge. A cyclist zipped by, tires hissing on damp gravel, and I felt a jolt of irritation at having to sidestep. My mind wandered again, unspooling plans for the day I knew I wouldn't finish. I thought of the laundry waiting in a sad heap by the washer, of the voicemail from my sister I hadn't returned, of the pile of unopened mail on the kitchen table. My feet settled into their rhythm, the familiar slap of soles against ground. I told myself that was enough. That motion meant progress. But the truth was, I was running in circles, trapped in a loop of grief and longing. Then it happened. A flicker of color on my left, a blur of dark green, a solid chest. The collision knocked the world sideways. My body slammed into someone, the impact exploding in a gasp of breath as we both went down. Time hiccuped, everything slowing to the rush of blood pounding in my ears. I landed hard, the ground cold and unforgiving beneath me. But what registered first wasn't the pain. It was the heat, the warmth of someone else's body under mine, solid and alive. I blinked, stunned, and found myself sprawled across a man. His face so close I could see the faint stubble on his chin, the surprised wideness of eyes the color of storm clouds. His arms were around me, reflexively steadying me. And for a wild, foolish second, I wanted to stay there forever. I sucked in a shaky breath. Sorry, I managed, my voice breaking on the word. I tried to push myself up, but my hands slipped, fingers pressing into the firmness of his chest. Heat surged through me, so intense I almost forgot the embarrassment. No, it's my fault, he said, a laugh tumbling from him, warm and rough-edged, vibrating against me. The sound made something deep inside me stir, something I thought had died with James. I scrambled upright, brushing gravel from my leggings, cheeks blazing. I risked a glance at him. He looked younger, late 20s maybe, hair dark and tousled, eyes still wide, but now softened with amusement. He got up with an easy grace, dusting himself off, tried not to stare at the ripple of muscle beneath his fitted shirt. The early morning light broke through the trees, gilding him in pale gold. His gaze found mine, held it just a second too long, and in that heartbeat, the world fell silent. The city, the park, the lingering night air, everything narrowed to the space between us. I pulled my eyes away, pulse hammering. "I'm really sorry," I said again, voice too loud in the hush of dawn. "I wasn't looking where I was going." "Neither was I," he said, smile crooked, voice soft. The way he looked at me made me feel seen, really seen, in a way I hadn't felt in years. My throat tightened. "I have a bad habit of getting lost in my head," I admitted, trying to sound casual. His laugh this time was richer, warmer, echoing against the stone walls of the park. "And I swear it made the morning brighter. That makes two of us," he replied, eyes sparkling like we shared some secret. We stood there for a moment, breathing the same damp air, each of us hesitating to leave. But the moment broke as quickly as it formed. "Well, goodbye then," I said, forcing a smile. "Goodbye," he echoed, and with a final glance, we turned away. As I ran on, every step felt heavier, my mind replaying the scene over and over, the feel of his arms, the sound of his voice, the impossible warmth of that accidental embrace, the echo of something I'd almost forgotten. Hope. They say New York never sleeps, but I learned quickly that it can feel lonelier at dawn than at midnight. The city wakes in slow waves, lights blinking on in high-rise apartments, the hiss of buses filling empty avenues. Each morning, I slipped through those hushed streets like a ghost, drawn back to the same stretch of Central Park where I'd collided with him. I told myself it was routine, that I'd always run here. But deep down, I knew it was hope that laced my sneakers tighter each morning. The first day after our encounter, I scanned every face along the path. Joggers in neon vests, dog walkers with tangled leashes, parents pushing strollers. My eyes darted, searching for a familiar tall figure, for dark hair catching the pale light. But there was no sign of him. The second day, I chastised myself. "Rebecca, you're being ridiculous. He's probably moved on with his life, and here you are chasing shadows." Yet my feet still carried me along the same route, eyes sweeping every bend, every cluster of benches. By the third morning, doubt settled like fog. Maybe he'd been a fluke, a mirage conjured by grief and desperation. But then I'd hear his laugh in my memory, that rich, effortless sound, and my resolve to let it go would crumble. The week unfolded with an aching slowness. On Thursday, the air smelled like burnt coffee drifting from a street cart, mingling with the scent of wet earth. A cyclist's bell rang sharp and clear as he passed. Startling me out of my thoughts, my heart leapt, imagining it was him calling out. But it was just a boy weaving past, earbuds in, oblivious. Friday arrived with a stubborn chill in the wind. I tried a different path through the ramble, weaving under twisted branches and across stone steps slick with dew. Still, every rustle in the bushes had me turning. Every figure ahead sparked a flutter of hope that quickly died. My mind filled the silence with questions. Who was he? Did he think about our collision at all? Or had he brushed it off the moment I disappeared into the trees? Was he laughing about it with friends? Or had he felt that spark too? I caught myself replaying every detail. The way his eyes softened when they met mine, the warmth of his hands steadying me, the easy curve of his smile. It was madness, I told myself, to let a stranger occupy so much space in my head. Yet the emptiness of my apartment each night only made the memories sharper. By Saturday, I found myself standing on the familiar dirt path, sweat cooling on my skin, lungs burning from the morning run. The park was busier, tourists gathering by the fountain, kids squealing with delight. But none of it reached me. I stood there, alone among the throngs, feeling like the last person awake in a city of dreams. I let my gaze drift to the bench where we first crashed into each other, its wooden slats glistening with morning dew. The memory of his voice whispered through me like a warm breeze, and for a moment I closed my eyes and let myself pretend he'd come jogging around the bend any second now, breathless, smiling, ready to tell me he'd been looking for me too. But when I opened my eyes, the path was empty, and the emptiness inside me felt impossibly vast. Saturday morning broke with a sky the color of faded denim, the city stirring reluctantly beneath it. I almost skipped my run, almost convinced myself to stay in bed and let the world move on without me. But something deeper than routine pushed me out the door. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was the hope I swore I'd given up on. I stepped into Central Park with a heart already heavy, air crisp and sharp against my skin. The usual cast of characters moved through the early light. Dog walkers with sleepy eyes, joggers with determination etched into their faces, vendors setting up carts with the smell of pretzels and coffee floating around them. I told myself, one last look. Then I'd let it go. I'd stop torturing myself with fantasies and get back to living whatever life I had left. That was when I saw him, across the street, just beyond the park entrance. Ethan stood stretching one leg up on a bench, his head tilted back, dark hair catching the pale gold of sunrise. My breath stuttered. For a heartbeat, I thought I was imagining him again, some cruel trick of memory. But then he shifted, rolled his shoulders, and the easy strength in his movements shattered any doubt. I barely noticed the barista calling my name inside the cafe behind me. The cup of coffee I'd ordered sat cooling on the counter, forgotten. My entire focus narrowed to Ethan, every nerve sparking with disbelief, relief, and a fear so sharp it made my stomach twist. I rushed out of the cafe, nearly tripping on the curb as I crossed the street. My heart pounded with every step, echoing in my ears louder than the city's morning clamor. As I approached, I tried to steady my breathing, tried to calm the wild tremor in my hands. "Hey," I managed, my voice pitched high with nerves as I stepped up beside him. He straightened, surprise flaring across his face before softening into recognition. "Oh, hey," he said, smile breaking over his features like sunrise over water. "Fancy seeing you here." I let out a shaky laugh, every bit of practiced casualness slipping through my fingers. "Yeah, I guess I'm predictable," I said, brushing hair behind my ear. He chuckled, eyes glinting with warmth. We stood there, the park humming quietly around us, the rest of the world fading to a soft blur. "I just wanted to apologize again," I blurted, the words tumbling over each other. "I think I practically flattened you last week." His laugh rang out, low and rich, chasing away the last of the morning chill. "Don't worry about it. I've had worse tumbles. Besides," he added with a playful glint, "it makes a great story." I smiled, the tension in my chest loosening slightly. "A good one, I hope." "Oh, definitely," he said, tilting his head. "Gorgeous woman bowls me over in Central Park. My friends will think I'm making it up." Warmth bloomed in my cheeks, both embarrassed and oddly exhilarated. "Well, I'm glad I could provide some entertainment," I teased, voice steadier now. I don't even know your name," I realized, words soft but urgent. "If I'm going to star in your story, I should at least get a proper introduction." "Ethan," he said, extending his hand with an easy grin. "And you are Rebecca," I replied, placing my hand in his. His grip was firm but gentle, sending a surprising jolt of heat up my arm. "Rebecca," he repeated, as if tasting the name, letting it linger on his tongue. "Nice to meet you, Rebecca." The sound of my name in his mouth sent a flutter through my chest. For a moment, we simply stood there, hands still touching, smiles lingering. The city's noise swelled around us, distant and muted, like waves against a far-off shore. I didn't want to leave, didn't want to break the fragile magic stretching between us. But doubt whispered that I was overstepping, reading too much into a simple coincidence. "Well," I said, slipping my hand from his, voice more composed than I felt, "I won't keep you from your workout. Thanks again for not holding my clumsiness against me." His smile softened, eyes bright. "No problem at all. And hey, maybe I'll see you around." I nodded, heart pounding, then turned away before I could lose my nerve and say something foolish. As I jogged off, I felt his gaze lingering on my back, warm and heavy, like sunlight on skin. Every step away from him felt both impossible and necessary. But I couldn't stop the tiny spark flaring in my chest, the hope that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't the end of our story. The next few mornings felt different, as if the air itself had shifted, charged with a quiet possibility. My steps quickened when I neared the spot where I'd last seen Ethan, my eyes scanning the path with a hope I tried to mask as casual curiosity. And he was there, sometimes leaning against a lamppost, sometimes stretching by the fountain, his tall figure unmistakable even from a distance. Each time our eyes met, a smile would bloom between us, shy at first, but growing bolder with every encounter. We started to talk, little by little, conversations that began with trivial things: the weather, the crowds of tourists, the best coffee in the neighborhood, but soon drifted into glimpses of who we were. He told me about his work as a personal trainer, the clients who tested his patience, and the ones who inspired him. I shared small pieces of my life, carefully omitting the deeper wounds I wasn't ready to expose. Sometimes we ran side by side, our feet pounding the gravel in quiet sync, the silence between us as comfortable as the conversations. I found myself looking forward to his jokes, the way he'd glance at me with a mischievous spark just before saying something that made me laugh out loud. One morning, as we jogged past a saxophonist playing near the literary walk, Ethan slowed to a walk and fell into step beside me. "You know, you have a really easy laugh," he said, voice soft but sure. "It's nice." I felt heat rise to my cheeks, the compliment unexpected and disarming. "Well, I guess it's been a while since someone S made me want to laugh," I admitted, my voice quieter than I intended. His eyes flicked to mine, serious now, studying me with a focus that made my pulse stutter. Then his lips curved again, gentle, understanding. "I'm glad I could be that someone," he said. We stood at the edge of the pond, the surface still and silvered under the early light. Ducks glided across, leaving ripples in their wake, and somewhere far off, church bells began to chime. The moment felt suspended, a pocket of time where nothing existed but the two of us. When he offered to walk me out of the park, I accepted, our conversation drifting into lighter topics. Favorite movies, worst meals we'd ever cooked, the strange collection of mugs I kept from thrift stores. His laugh at that last one was so genuine it made something in my chest ache, sharp and sweet. As we reached the sidewalk, I hesitated, not wanting to break the spell. "You're good company, Ethan," I said, words spilling out before I could stop them. He looked at me with something like surprise, then warmth. "So are you, Rebecca." He paused, eyes searching mine. "Same time tomorrow." My heart fluttered, wild and unsteady. "Yeah," I breathed, "same time." I watched him jog away, his silhouette shrinking against the rising sun. I stood there long after he disappeared, the city's noise growing around me, the world spinning on. But for the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't running just to escape my own thoughts. I was running towards something new, something alive. The morning after he first suggested coffee, I woke before my alarm, the sky outside still dark and quiet. My heart thudded with a mix of excitement and terror. I'd replayed our last conversation countless times, the way his eyes lingered on mine when he asked if I wanted to grab a coffee. I told myself to calm down, that it was just two people sharing a drink, nothing more. But the hope pulsing beneath my ribs betrayed me. I arrived early, standing outside the cafe on the corner of West 72nd, shifting from foot to foot as the city stirred to life. Delivery trucks grumbled down side streets, Pigeons pecked at crumbs on the sidewalk, and the scent of baking bread drifted from a bakery across the avenue. When Ethan appeared, striding through the morning light with easy confidence, my breath caught. His smile found me instantly, and the world seemed to brighten a shade. "Hey," he said, warmth in his voice. "I hope you didn't wait long." "Not at all," I lied, feeling the tension in my shoulders melt. Inside, the cafe was cozy, golden light spilling across wooden tables and worn chairs. The hum of conversation was low, the hiss of the espresso machine punctuating the soft music drifting from hidden speakers. We found a small table near the window, 2 steaming mugs between us. At first, we talked about simple things, the barista's questionable playlist, the weather's stubborn chill. But slowly, the conversation dipped into deeper currents. He asked about my job, my favorite books, the way I liked to spend rainy afternoons. His questions were careful, curious, never pushy, and I found myself opening up more than I expected. I told him about James, about the first time I saw him across a crowded college library, about his corny jokes, his patient heart, the way he'd bring me coffee just the way I liked it. Ethan listened without interrupting, his eyes steady on mine, his expression soft but unflinching. I stumbled when I reached the part about the hospital, the nights I spent curled in a chair beside a bed that grew colder every day. My voice cracked, the words falling into the space between us like stones. "I'm sorry," I whispered, brushing at my eyes. "I didn't mean to unload all that." "Don't be sorry," he said quietly, reaching across the table. His hand covered mine, warm and strong, his thumb brushing against my knuckles. "Thank you for trusting me with that." His words hit something tender inside me, a place I thought had long since gone numb. The world outside the window blurred, people rushing past in a city that never paused. But for a moment, time slowed just for us. We sat there, hands still joined, until our coffees grew cold. We talked about smaller things then, the weirdest dreams we'd ever had, the one food we couldn't stand, each laugh easing the weight between us. When he walked me out, the sun was climbing higher, the air warming with the promise of spring. Standing at the corner, I hesitated, not ready to let him go. He smiled, a soft curve that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "See you tomorrow?" he asked, voice low. "Yeah," I breathed, a smile blooming across my face. "Tomorrow." As he jogged away, I held the warmth of his hand in mine, a glow that lingered long after he disappeared. For the first time in what felt like forever, the ache of loss was tempered by something new, a fragile, flickering hope that maybe I wasn't as alone as I'd always believed. The morning felt like it pulsed with a secret. I dressed with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, checked my reflection too many times, and left my apartment with a heart that refused to calm. The sky above Central Park was painted in shades of gold and pale blue, the city humming with the promise of a perfect spring day. When I saw Ethan by the fountain, my breath caught. He was waiting, leaning casually against the stone ledge, the early light catching the angles of his face. His smile, when he spotted me, sent a shiver through me, soft and dangerous, all at once. We fell into an easy rhythm, walking side by side beneath budding trees. Our conversation was lighter than the day before, stories about embarrassing childhood moments, favorite ice cream flavors, the odd jobs we'd each taken to pay rent in our 20s. But the space between us felt charged, every brush of his shoulder against mine, sending a warm current through my veins. As we reached a quiet, shaded path away from the crowds, we slowed, the silence stretching long and delicate. He stopped, turning to face me fully. "Rebecca," he said, my name a soft exhale, his eyes dark and searching. I didn't know who moved first. One moment there was distance. The next his hand was at my cheek, warm and sure, tilting my face up to his. Our lips met in a kiss that started tentative, questioning, but deepened with a rush that stole my breath. I felt it then, a surge of warmth spreading through me, a wave of something bright and fierce that unraveled the knots I'd carried for so long. My world narrowed to the taste of him, the steady heat of his hand, the quiet sounds of morning falling away like a receding tide. The kiss broke, but only just. His forehead rested against mine, his breath mingling with mine. I could feel his heart racing, mirroring my own, a silent admission of everything words couldn't yet hold. We found ourselves back at my apartment before I fully understood what was happening. The city's noise dulled behind my door, the air inside thick with something electric. We stood there, a breath apart, our eyes locked in a question neither of us needed to voice. When we came together again, it was with a quiet intensity that left no room for hesitation. Every touch was gentle, but sure, every movement deliberate, like a conversation spoken in a language older than words. There were no sharp edges, only a slow, aching heat that spread through every part of me, a warmth that softened the hard places I thought would never heal. It felt like the world outside had melted away, leaving only this moment, this connection, this fragile, impossible hope. Time bent around us, stretching and folding until I didn't know where he ended and I began. My thoughts scattered, replaced by the steady beat of our hearts, the hush of our breaths. And when we finally lay still, tangled in each other, the quiet in the room was different. It wasn't the hollow silence of loss I'd known for so long, but something full, almost peaceful, like the hush of dawn before the first birds sing. I closed my eyes, letting the warmth of him seep into me, and for the first time in years, I let myself believe that I deserved this, that maybe, just maybe, there was still life left to live. The morning light spilled through the blinds in thin, glowing lines, cutting across the bed and the tangled sheets. I woke slowly, the warmth of Ethan beside me anchoring me in a way I hadn't felt in years. His breathing was deep, and even his chest rising and falling with a calm that made me want to stay frozen in that moment forever. I turned my head slightly, taking in the soft curve of his jaw, the way a few strands of dark hair fell across his forehead. In the quiet, I let myself imagine that this could be real, that we could wake up like this again tomorrow, and the day after, until the empty spaces inside me finally closed. His arm tightened around me as if he could feel my thoughts, and a slow warmth spread through me, gentle and bright. I closed my eyes, letting myself sink deeper into that glow, the hush of morning wrapping around us like a blanket. I thought of all the nights I'd spent alone in this bed, staring at the ceiling until dawn, waiting for time to dull the sharp edges of my grief. I thought of the silence that had filled the apartment like a fog, the way it pressed in on me until it felt like I might disappear entirely. But now, with his heartbeat steady against mine, the silence felt different, not empty, but full of possibility. I shifted slightly, the movement stirring him awake. His eyes blinked open, still heavy with sleep, and he looked at me with a softness that caught me off guard. Morning, he murmured, voice low and rough. Morning, I whispered back, a smile tugging at my lips. We lay there, eyes searching each other's faces, words unspoken hanging in the quiet. My heart fluttered with a strange mix of hope and fear. I wanted to ask him what this meant, what we were now, but the questions felt too heavy for the delicate hush of dawn. He brushed a thumb along my cheek, his touch light but sure. I don't want to rush this, he said quietly, his eyes serious. I want to know you, really know you. The words settled into me like a promise, warm and terrifying all at once. I nodded, unable to speak past the sudden tightness in my throat. We rose together, moving slowly through the morning routines, as if afraid to break the fragile magic that had carried us through the night. He stood behind me in the kitchen while I made coffee, his hands resting on my hips, his presence a solid, comforting weight. Over steaming mugs, we talked in low voices about little things, the plans for the day, the best way to spend a Sunday afternoon. But every glance, every brush of hands, felt electric with the unspoken knowledge of what we'd shared. When he finally pulled me close, pressing a lingering kiss to my forehead, the world outside seemed to quiet, as if it, too, was waiting to see what would happen next. I watched him leave, his figure retreating down the street, and for a moment, fear pricked at the edges of my thoughts. But it faded quickly, replaced by the warmth still thrumming through me. As I stood alone in my doorway, the sunlight breaking fully across the city, I realized I felt something I hadn't dared believe in for so long. I felt alive. The morning after felt different, like I was seeing the world through clearer eyes. The city outside my window seemed sharper, the sounds crisper, each detail more alive than it had been in years. But beneath the lightness was a tremor of uncertainty, a quiet worry humming just below the surface. As I moved around my apartment, tidying the remnants of the night before, I found myself replaying every moment. The way Ethan's laugh had echoed in my small kitchen. The way his eyes had softened when they looked at me, like he saw someone worth staying for. The way his hands had felt in mine, grounding and warm. Yet doubts slipped in through the cracks of that memory. What if I'd read too much into the softness of his voice? What if to him this was just a moment of kindness, a way to soothe a lonely stranger? By the time I stepped outside, the air was already warming, sun glinting off the tops of cars lined up along the avenue. I walked slowly, each footstep heavy with questions. I told myself I wouldn't look for him, that I'd give him space. But when I reached the park entrance, my eyes scanned the familiar path almost instinctively. He wasn't there. My chest tightened, breath catching in a way that felt both foolish and painfully real. I tried to shake it off, forced myself to keep moving deeper into the park, feet crunching over gravel, morning joggers, passing in blurs of neon and sweat. But every turn of the path felt emptier without him. I found myself slowing near the bench where we'd first met, fingers brushing the worn wood, remembering the way we'd collided, the laughter that had bloomed so easily. That memory felt fragile now, delicate as spun glass. The hours crawled by. I sat on a bench by the lake, watched the sunlight dance across the rippling water, felt the cool breeze lift strands of hair from my face. The world was so alive around me, and yet I felt like a ghost drifting through it, invisible and untouched. When I finally rose to leave, I caught sight of him across the street, walking away from the park entrance I'd been scanning all morning. He moved with a briskness that made my heart sink, as if he was already somewhere else entirely in his mind. I crossed the road without thinking, dodging a taxi that blared its horn, my pulse hammering. "Ethan," I called, my voice sharper than I intended. He turned, surprise flashing across his face. "Rebecca," he said, sounding cautious, almost guarded. "Hi," I managed, trying to smile through the knot in my throat. I thought we might grab another coffee." His eyes flicked away, uncertainty clouding them. I could almost see the walls going up, the warmth I'd come to crave fading from his expression. "Rebecca," he began, his voice low, and something inside me twisted. "I know this is sudden," I rushed, words tumbling over each other. "But I don't want to lose this. I don't want to lose you." He looked back at me then, really looked, and the silence between us stretched thin and taut. A silence that held 100 unsaid things. "I'm sorry," he finally said, the words landing with a dull weight. "I didn't mean to lead you on. Last night was a kindness," I finished for him, voice shaking. "You don't have to say it." His eyes softened with regret, but it was too late. The crack had already split open. I stood there as he took a hesitant step back, then another, until he turned and walked away. I watched him until he disappeared into the throng of morning commuters, the city swallowing him whole. The rush of traffic roared in my ears, the world moving around me as if nothing had changed. But everything had. I wrapped my arms around myself, the warmth of him still lingering on my skin like a fading dream. The ache that settled in my chest was familiar, old, but sharper than it had ever been. And as I turned and began the long walk home, the city felt as cold and indifferent as it had the morning James died. The city blurred around me as I walked, every face a smudge, every sound a distant echo. My feet moved without thought, carrying me block after block until I reached my apartment. I climbed the stairs slowly, keys cold and sharp in my hand. The door swung open with a groan, the quiet inside swallowing me whole. I sank onto the couch, the same place I'd spent so many evenings alone, and let the silence press down. The walls felt closer than ever, the ticking of the kitchen clock too loud. Every second a reminder of the empty space beside me. I thought of Ethan's eyes when he said goodbye, the flicker of regret, the careful words that cut deeper because they were spoken with kindness. I replayed every moment from our first collision to the way he'd looked at me over coffee, searching for signs I'd missed. Had he ever truly felt it too? Or had I invented it all, desperate for something to fill the ache James left behind? I rose and drifted through the apartment, fingers trailing over the back of the chair, the stack of unopened letters, the half-finished puzzle James. And I had started one rainy afternoon years ago. Dust clung to the pieces, edges dulled by time. My gaze caught on the photo on the bookshelf, James smiling at the beach, his arm around me, wind whipping our hair. I picked it up, thumb brushing the glass, and the grief crashed over me in a wave so fierce it stole my breath. I slid down to the floor, photo clutched to my chest, tears slipping hot and silent down my cheeks. I thought I'd survived the worst of it. I thought I'd learned how to live with the empty chair at the table, the quiet bed, the absence that had become part of me. But hope was a dangerous thing. It let you dream, made you believe in fresh starts, only to remind you how deep the wounds really went. Memories of the night with Ethan flashed in shards, his laugh rumbling low, the way his hand curved to the shape of my waist, the softness in his eyes. For a moment, I let myself remember how it felt to be wanted, even if it had been an illusion. As the afternoon light shifted, shadows creeping across the floor, I forced myself to stand. My legs were shaky, but I moved to the kitchen, filled the kettle, watched the water swirl under the tap. The simplest motions felt monumental, each task an anchor to the present. I carried my tea to the window, looked out over the city pulsing below. The view had once comforted me, the lights like stars fallen to earth. Now it felt indifferent, a glittering expanse that didn't care if I existed or not. In the reflection of the glass, I caught my own face, eyes red but resolute, shoulders hunched but still standing. I stared until the lines softened, until I saw not just the grief, but the quiet strength that had carried me this far. I placed the photo back on the shelf, wiping a tear-streaked cheek. My hands lingered on the frame, but this time I let it go. The apartment was still and heavy, but somewhere deep inside, a small, steady pulse reminded me that I was still here, still breathing, still capable of something more than just surviving. The morning after felt gentler than I expected. The ache was still there, dull and constant, but it didn't swallow me whole. The city outside my window was waking up, soft light spilling over brick walls, horns blaring far below, 1,000 lives unfolding at once. And for the first time, I realized mine could keep unfolding too. I dressed slowly, choosing a favorite sweater that had spent too long tucked away. I tied my hair back with steady hands. Each movement felt like an act of quiet defiance against the sadness trying to settle in my bones. The streets were already busy when I stepped outside, the air fresh with the promise of spring. I walked without purpose, letting the crowds carry me through the hum of the morning. Vendors called out their prices. Dogs barked. Music drifted from an open cafe door. The world felt alive, and somehow I felt part of it again. I stopped by a bookstore on Columbus Avenue, fingers brushing the spines of novels I'd once loved. I let myself linger, pulled one from the shelf, and read the first page until the words blurred. The quiet rustle of pages, the smell of paper, the soft creak of the wooden floor. It felt like slipping into a memory of who I used to be later. I wandered into a community center I'd passed 100 times, but never entered. A flyer pinned by the door caught my eye, a sign-up sheet for a weekend art class, bold letters promising creativity for healing. I stood there, pen hovering, heart beating faster than it should. Then I wrote my name. The simple act sent a ripple of warmth through me, a spark of something fragile and fierce. I stepped back onto the sidewalk, blinking at the bright sky. The ache in my chest didn't vanish, but it shifted, loosening its grip just enough to let hope slip through. As I walked home, I noticed details I'd ignored for so long. The crocus flowers pushing up between cracks in the pavement, the laughter of 2 kids chasing each other down the block, the way the sun hit the tops of buildings and made them glow. When I reached my apartment, I paused before going inside. I looked up at the sky, pale blue and endless, and let myself breathe it in. The loneliness was still there, but it felt less like a void and more like space. A space I could fill slowly with pieces of a new life. I set my keys on the table, shed my coat, and stood in the quiet of my home. But it didn't feel as heavy as before. The silence wasn't empty. It was open, waiting. And for the first time in years, I smiled to myself. A real smile. A small promise that I would keep moving forward, not to chase someone else, but to find the woman I'd lost somewhere along the way.